I come before you today to deliver a call of action to each and every one of you, a call of action that each of you commit to get personally involved in a multi-stakeholder effort to address key internet policy issues, to find consensus approaches to dealing with the issues, and to implement those solutions. Now, is that too much to ask at 9 o'clock this morning? I don't think it is. But to do this, you're going to need some help. And I'm going to provide some help right now to those of you perplexed and confused by the multi-stakeholder process. First, we need a shared understanding of what is the multi-stakeholder process, and we need a shared understanding of what it is not. Now, there is no single model of the multi-stakeholder process, but for purposes of this discussion, let's focus on the key attributes that define an authentic multi-stakeholder process. One, it must be stakeholder-driven in that stakeholders determine the process and scope and direction of work. Two, it must be open and inclusive, both in terms of allowing broad participation and in ensuring that all issues are addressed. Three, the process must be transparent and accountable to all stakeholders and to the public. And four, outcomes must be consensus-based, delivering positive value to the greatest number of stakeholders. Now, a multi-stakeholder process that exhibits all of these attributes is most likely to be one that will be accepted as legitimate by the stakeholders and the public. Just as important as what is a multi-stakeholder process is understanding what it is not. And one, it is not an ism. The multi-stakeholder process is simply a set of tools to help people collaborate to solve problems. It is not a philosophy or a political ideology, and we do the process a disservice to refer to it as an ism because it encourages people to argue about it and take sides about what should be a set of tools that can provide and help everyone. Secondly, beware of those who haphazardly or even manipulatively attach the label multi-stakeholder to what in fact are multilateral or top-down processes. When a government or a business runs a consultation that is open to input from all stakeholders, but keeps the decision-making to itself, it in no way is running a true multi-stakeholder process. And we find that rarely do such efforts even allow for collaboration among the stakeholders, much less decision-making by them. So, having described what is a multi-stakeholder process and what it is not, let me turn to my second point, which is that people are reluctant or afraid to take the initiative to establish multi-stakeholder processes. Part of that fear stems from people not knowing how to organize and manage a multi-stakeholder process, and that can be easily overcome. The Internet Society's Collaborative Governance Initiative is developing training materials on how to run multi-stakeholder processes, and there are already lots of instructional materials available. We in the Internet community may like to think that the multi-stakeholder process was born with the Internet, but that's simply not the case. Collaboration and consensus-building techniques have been around for decades, and there are many instructional guides and manuals available worldwide to anyone who needs some help. But trust me when I tell you that of the keys to successful multi-stakeholder process, they mostly reflect simple common sense and basic stakeholder management principles. It's not rocket science, and it is easy to learn. Another part of the fear and reluctance to bring forward multi-stakeholder processes stems from the sense that the problems today are so large that protecting privacy, battling cybersecurity threats, and the like, these are so large that people are intimidated about trying to organize a response. Also, there's a predisposition to want comprehensive, enforceable solutions to these problems, which usually translates into waiting for government or some other organization to take the initiative. I urge you not to let that fear deter you from taking action. The existing government processes to enact comprehensive legislation or write regulations or negotiate treaties are not well equipped to deal with the fast-changing issues of the Internet. These processes are slow. They usually don't result in any outcome. And even when they do, the problem that they intended to address often no longer exists. And if they get it wrong, it's incredibly difficult to undo bad legislation or regulation. Instead, I encourage each of you to think about how to address internet policy challenges in smaller bits. Can you define a piece of the issue in a way that a group of stakeholders in your own country or region could address the topic, find a consensus solution, and then have stakeholders implement it? We need to encourage experimentation around the world. We need to encourage finding ways to make incremental progress on issues by solving parts of the problem and then building on the small successes through iterations of the process over time. You will need to be creative. You will have to focus on elements of these issues whose solutions are within the power of the participating stakeholders to implement. And let me say that implementation is key. Too often participants in multi-stakeholder processes claim success when they reach consensus on the solution, but then they fail to address who's going to implement the solution and how it will be implemented. You must focus right from the start to define the problem to be solved in a way that allows the parties to the process to implement any consensus outcome. As an example of what I mean, take the issue of disinformation or fake news online. Some of the responses being discussed involve creating comprehensive regulatory frameworks for deciding what is disinformation and what to do about it. Absent a government convening the multi-stakeholder process to create such a framework, there is little use to having you organize your own process to develop such a scheme. You have no authority or ability to implement the framework, and because of that fact, you would have a hard time sustaining such a discussion for any length of time. But that doesn't mean it's an issue you should stay away from. You can make a contribution to solving the problem. What if you convened a multi-stakeholder process to develop and implement an educational program on media literacy? You could certainly identify a set of stakeholders who would have the ability and incentive to design and deliver such a program. Now, none of you can do this by yourself. You need to work together with others in your community. You need to recruit stakeholders who will represent all of the key views that have to be addressed. But it takes a catalyst. Someone who steps forward and takes that lead to initiate the discussion. And each and every one of you can play that role as a catalyst. No matter how narrow the issue you take up or how limited the geographical extent of the discussion, every successful multi-stakeholder decision that is implemented provides input into new norms for answering the challenges before us. Over time, they will combine and compound into broad solutions. And if and when governments decide to legislate a comprehensive enforceable approach, they will be guided by the aggregation of these individual solutions. Commentators refer to the internet as having allowed permissionless innovation. The idea that allowing experimentation with new technologies without requiring government or competitor approval. What I'm urging all of you today is to engage in permissionless problem solving. If we all make it our responsibility, perhaps we can spur the next great leap forward for the internet to better recognize and respect human rights, to better deter cybercrime and cyber attacks, and to better meet the needs of citizens around the world. And all I ask is that you give it a try. So please do it, and I thank you for listening to me this morning.